Hello again, and thank you for staying with us. We continue here and back to our top story, where Rand Water is warning of a system collapse in Gauteng. The utility says its systems are under pressure, mostly due to consumption or high consumption. For more reaction, we are now joined by Dr Ferrial Adam, who's the Executive Manager at WaterCan. Good to have you on the program, Dr. Adam. So with the recent warning from Rand Water about this possibility of a system collapse, if you will, in Gauteng, can you explain how the excessive water consumption from metros like Johannesburg as well as Tshwane, how have they compounded the water crisis in the region?
Good evening, Nhlanhla, and to your viewers. I think the first thing we need to understand is that when Rand Water says that there's high consumption, it must also take into account the high amount of leakage that we have in our system. So if you just take Johannesburg, for example, we're reaching almost 30% of our water that's just being lost through leaks. And if you look at the last, say, week and a half, we haven't had high consumption in many areas because many areas did not actually have water, and some still don't have water. So the thing is, the loss of water is the leaks, and that needs to be given the attention.
Yeah. So there's been a mention that the real issue lies within the province's crumbling infrastructure. Please elaborate on how the aging infrastructure in places like Johannesburg, how has this contributed to the ongoing water shortages, and also what immediate steps should be taken to repair or even replace it?
So if you look at the fact that, for almost 10 years, the amount of money that was spent to maintain and repair our water infrastructure was actually next to nothing. So you've got infrastructure that needs to be repaired, needs to be maintained every year, and for 10 years there was neglect. So what has happened is not only do we have the pipes that are leaking, and everybody in Joburg at some point has a burst pipe or a leakage or something, but the other very concerning issue is the fact that almost half of our reservoirs are leaking. So that means there's no real storage in terms of water in the city of Johannesburg specifically. And unless we fix that, and we need to give urgency to that. Now, the thing is, if you say to the city, we need to actually fix those, they'll say we don't have the money to do so. But at the moment, they are replacing 14 kilometers of water pipeline a year. We have 12,100 kilometers of pipeline. That is not going to be able to fix the system. So what needs to happen is what we've been calling for as WaterCan, is we need to ring fence the budget. So the money that Joburg Water gets needs to be increased that can be spent on operations and for maintenance of our water infrastructure. So that's the first thing we're calling for. There was a petition. We are demanding that be tabled at the next budget meeting at the city of Johannesburg.
Also interesting is that your organization, WaterCan, you've criticized the lack of communication, especially from the city of Johannesburg regarding water outages. What do you think is causing this breakdown in communication, and what improvements would you recommend to indeed ensure that residents are better informed in future?
Well, I can't understand why there's this lack of communication. I do think that Rand Water and Joburg Water do use social media and WhatsApp, but the problem is that a lot of people affected by water, elderly people, don't know how to use those channels. So they end up not knowing. What they need during crisis time, like we're having right now, is a regular update, whether it's daily, whether it's twice a day. But we need something, whether it's on TV or whether it's on radio, where people can have easy access. And that was missing. But you've mentioned the city. And I need to say that often when we go through these kind of water outages in the cities, the mayors and this mayor, the previous mayor, the mayor before that, have been absent and silent. Today was the first time that I saw the mayor talking about the water issue, but it's well into the crisis. And that doesn't give people much hope.
Right.
So I think you said, what can we do about that to improve it? I think we need to move away from a government that is afraid of telling the truth, of saying this is the story and this is how we need to deal with it. The more you hide things, the more suspicious people get and the less they trust the news that's coming out. So we need openness, we need transparency. But we also need a government that includes civil society. You know, for the last 2 weeks, it's been civil society organizations like the Water Crisis Committee, the Joburg Crisis Alliance, WaterCan, that have been responsible for kind of getting information to people.
Yeah.
So Joburg Water, Rand Water, the city of Joburg need to find a way to engage better with us so that there is this kind of communication that's open, transparent, and most importantly, honest.
Speaking about responses from the city, water tankers have been used oftentimes as a short-term solution to the water crisis. But you've stated that these are essentially ineffective. How can the city then move away from these temporary fixes and focus on more longer-term strategies that can address, call it the root cause of the water crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to move away from the tanks for a number of reasons. I mean, if you look at Hammanskraal, the reason that Hammanskraal has been in the state that it is because they just have water tanks and they think it's okay to then have, you know, as a long-term solution. The challenge is for the areas that were affected just through this crisis, there are not enough water tanks that can actually make sure that people can get water. The other thing is, when you think of water tanks, it's not that simple for elderly, for people who are sick, that need to go out and carry these heavy buckets of or meet the trucks in certain places and then get back to their places with water. So it's really a stopgap measure. It should never be something that we have as a long-term thing. The other reason why we're saying let's not focus too much on water tanks and make it a long-term thing is because then you have the creeping in of corruption, the creeping in of the water tanker mafia. And so we need to, the only way to stop that is to make ourselves less reliant on water tanks.
Yeah. You've also pointed out the lack of leadership from the city officials during recent water crises. In your opinion, what are the key qualities of leadership that are indeed required to effectively manage or even resolve this crisis? And are there any local leaders who have set, call it a positive example in tackling such challenges?
So I think the first thing is we need leaders with vision, because this issue that we're facing in terms of water is a national issue. But if we just take in the cities, now we're talking about Gauteng, we need leadership that can look 5 years and say, actually, this is what we need to do right now. And I'm not seeing that. I am not seeing the foresight that leaders should have. The second thing is we need leaders that can be honest, that can articulate what is going on without the technical jargon that we have to go through and break it down for other people. That is what we need right now. And also, in times of crisis, be more present. That is what we need in terms of leadership.
But with the Rand Water's directive, essentially to reduce water supply in line with the licensed quotas, and considering the rising demand as well in the city, how do you see the water supply situation evolving, especially over the next few months? And what role can government and residents play in mitigating the issue?
So I think the first thing is it comes back to the state of our infrastructure. And I think that what needs to happen with the city and with Joburg Water is that they need more funding so they can tackle the leaks in our city. That's not just for Joburg. Ekurhuleni has leaks, Tshwane has leaks. We need to focus on the water losses. The fact that as a country we're losing about 40% of our water through leaks is unacceptable. So that's something that should be like the focus. That should be where we put our energy and efforts into. That's the first thing. I think in terms of, and I do think that people have a role and responsibility to play as well. We can't put everything onto government. So I think that, yes, many areas now have not had water. So now if you say to them, save water, they'll probably like, what water must I save? Which is fair. But what is also, what we need to be mindful of is, yes, government has messed up. We are sitting with this infrastructure that's in a state of affairs. So we need to do our part to make sure that the water that we are getting can go a longer way. And that is something we need to realize. So we need to have in our heads and in our minds, we need to change our relationship with water. We need to have a level 1 restriction in our minds. But also, when water starts coming back and we're getting feedback from different areas, what we're seeing is that people are now filling up their JoJo tanks. because they're afraid that next week they're not going to get water again, so they need to fill up the Jojo tanks. But filling up the Jojo tanks puts a strain on the reservoirs. So we need to find a middle ground where we're all engaging and we're speaking to each other. And that's the other thing in terms of leadership. We need a leadership that brings all the people together to say, let's try and find these solutions together and let's work together. Because right now, there's a complete mistrust of government, and every kind of information that comes out of it, people don't trust it. So when government says save water, people are saying, why? There are leaks outside this, outside my house. Why must I save water? We need to remember that two wrongs don't make a right. We have to also play our part.
Dr. Adam, before I let you go, I want to speak a bit about the work of your organization. How is WaterCan working, especially to bring awareness to the water crisis and pressure authorities to take meaningful action? Could you share any recent successes or even initiatives that you are particularly proud of?
Yes, definitely. So WaterCan, we work very much around building a network of citizen science activists. And how we're doing that is we purchase these testing kits, which allows you to test the quality of your drinking water, rivers, streams, wetlands, dams. And you are able to tell in this little box, you can test for chemical strips and you have bacteria. So you can tell if there's E. coli or total coliform in your drinking water. So that's something we've been doing, and we've been doing it nationally. So we don't only work in Johannesburg. The other thing we do is obviously after people test, we don't stop there. If their water is bad, we try to get them to work with the municipalities, try to alert the municipalities to say, look, you need to come and test, you need to monitor the water. So we try to engage municipalities where we can. We've had some successes in areas. Sometimes it's a little bit harder, but we are continuing. On the other front is we work on advocacy. So we watch policy, we watch budgets, and we try to see where it is that we can engage government to make a difference. The one thing we've done, which I think is quite successful, is we have worked well with other groups because we can't do it on our own. We also have established 2 water farms, one in KwaZulu-Natal and one in Johannesburg. And that water farm brings in your Rand water, your Joburg water, your city, and it brings in civil society so we can try to do that engagement that I was talking about. So those are the kinds of things we have done. The other thing we've done most recently is we had a petition last year, and we've handed that petition over at the Joburg Crisis Alliance Summit. That was about 2 weeks ago, and asked the Speaker of the City of Johannesburg to please table it at the budget discussion on the 26th, 27th of February. That is something that we're watching, because what that petition is asking for is saying, Joburg Water needs more money. Can we please ring fence money for water and sanitation?
Dr. Ferrial Adam, thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights with us today concerning issues around water and supply issues experienced in parts of Gauteng. We bring you more news coming up in a moment. We also hear more details about a Valentine's Day scam warning for South Africans. Do stay with us.